Welcome, everyone. Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, let's talk about one of the biggest problems out there that people just don't get. What's the difference between an analog signal and a digital signal? Now, let's go over the problem here in terms of what this means in common regular science and how this affects the world of scalar and vibrational energies in general. So you've got to understand what this is if you're going to build a machine and how to use it. Now, this is one of the problems that we have, particularly in the, quote, scalar or radionic industry, is that they have no idea what this energy is and never had. They can't figure it out. They don't get it. They don't understand what is being produced, why these machines actually work. They fall into placebos. They fall into not understanding it. And of course, people talk a lot about scalar, but they don't really understand it. Scalar is a non-electromagnetic energy field, not electric. So when we talk about things like frequencies and Rife technology and all this, you're talking about basically electromagnetic frequencies. These are things you can put a meter on, etc., and can be measured and controlled to a large extent. This is not what scalar is. Scalar is a non-electromagnetic field as detailed by Tesla. Hieronymus talked about these as well. And anybody who knows anything about scalar or radionic energies has to understand that, and they don't. People think that there's some electrical process going on with radionic machines because they have electrical looking machines. And of course, that's all part of it. And this technology, of course, if you can even call it that now, goes back over 100 years to very primitive technology that people keep copying. And they're not moving on to understanding what it is. Well, of course, in the 1920s, Albert Abrams, the semi-inventor of all this stuff, and this was the time when electricity was just coming on. He called it ERA, the electric reaction of Abrams. Of course, as a typical scientist, doctor guy, he named it after himself. But you understand that there's electric in there. He's not talking about these other energies. And of course, if you don't use common electromagnetic energies, people don't believe anything is happening. And that's a very ignorant way of looking at things, particularly in this understanding, this advanced time we're in to some degree of quantum physics. And all energies are not in the electromagnetic spectrum. But of course, a lot of scientists will tell you that. If it's not in the electromagnetic spectrum, it doesn't exist because they can't detect it. They can't slap a meter on it. Well, the bottom line is that that's because there hasn't been any research done in that area, and that's because we have a dumbademia who continues to puke their ignorant garbage on all society and produce no results while collecting a nice big fat paycheck. So what do we have to understand? Now, we do understand with common science, and this is not something that is theoretical, meaning if, ands, but, maybe. This is something, of course, that is understood on what we could say an engineering reality. And engineers are not scientists. They apply known technologies that work into other technologies. So the whole idea is it's important to understand the difference between basically an engineer, which will build something like a bridge, and it stands up or it falls, and you can't have too many falling bridges. So they're using known technologies to make things work. So there's a big difference there, but it doesn't mean that engineers are smart or know anything. They're using known and fall back on the same understandings all the time for literally hundreds of years. But when you really get down to it, engineers still can't build all the things that have been built before. How do you move pyramid blocks? How do you move 60-ton heads that are carved in the Amazon? All of these things are completely and totally unknown. So they can't figure out that because they're stuck in the ABCs of engineering. But let's talk about analog versus digital. Now, what is an analog signal? Basically, an analog signal is one that is a continuous signal. Now, you can write this on a piece of paper. You have a wiggly line that you write on a piece of paper, and it's continuous. Okay? This is an analog signal. What is a digital signal? Well, a digital signal is when you take that analog signal and you break it up into little pieces. You could illustrate this, as is done online in many different places, that here you got this squiggly line um, running that's contiguous. There's no breaks in it whatsoever. Now, an analog, of course, you can see it as a stairways going up. So they're little breaks. There's constant little breaks or little stairs. So you've got this kind of a jagged stairways going up. And what they've done is broken the signal into little bits and pieces. Now, these little bits and pieces can serve a great function, which means that you can now manipulate the little bits and pieces. Now, if you want to manipulate an analog energy, you have to manipulate the entire analog signal. You can't break it up and take one area of it. Now, to illustrate this or explain it a little better, let's say you have a photograph, and in the upper right-hand corner, it's blurry and bad, or maybe it's too much light. Well, with an analog thing, you'd have to adjust the entire picture to tone down that one bright area, thus making a maybe a little better image, but one that still is not really pinpointed. What you'd want to do is just take care of that washed out or bad area, and that's what digital allows you to do. So those broken little pieces, where you go up to the little piece that is just in that upper right-hand corner that is washed out, and you manipulate those particular areas only. So you're not affecting the entire picture, which may be good. You're affecting the troubled area. To put this kind of in a very succinct and easy way to understand, I can get very technical and talk about all these things, but who cares? The whole idea is to take something complex and make it simple. That's called education, something teachers and scientists know nothing about because they want to live in the fantasy that they're smarter than you and use big words because they can't really explain anything. I certainly can. So the whole idea is that's the difference. Now, the problem is when you start breaking up a signal, particularly a dense signal, which is what scalar energies are, because these are not electromagnetic in nature, but when you try and grab a signal in its little pieces and you try and make everything in little pieces or digitalize it, which again has its benefits for common things. So, as I said, for processing pictures, so many things are digitalized that are better. Photographs in general, that when you use a digital camera, what happens is that they screen out a lot of stuff. They make it looky pretty. And then, of course, you can make it looky even more pretty by messing with that, by editing pictures. And you can edit pictures that are digital in nature, or you're going to have to take an analog picture and make it digital so that you can, again, edit it. Now, when we're talking about scalar energy fields, we don't want any editing whatsoever. And when you start taking extremely dense information, you're talking about how many and they're not, what are trigabytes? What is it? Terabytes of information. Huge amounts of terabyte of information. This is huge informational energetic fields. And you start digitalizing them. You start messing up that field. You're actually breaking up the field so you can manipulate it. Now, that may be good when you have a photograph, but it's not good when you're using an informational energetic form to affect some other matter. You need the entire energetic field kept intact for it to work. So this is the difference between analog and digital. An analog is very superior in certain areas and very inferior for kind of practical, boring stuff. TVs, photographs, even music to a degree. But the problem is music has a resonance to it. So you get very pure sound out of phonographic records that spin around using a crystal to pick up the vibrations and then going to a particular speaker. So you can pick up very pure sounds in some ways. I'm not a big fan of vinyl records. They're heavy, they're easily messed with. These are a big fad right now. And I think a lot has to do with the fact that you also kind of get something for your vinyl record. It's big. It certainly is heavy. Anybody who's moved records around, they're even heavier than most books. but you got a big picture on it. You got all this information you can read. I mean, people used to sit and listen to their records and read the album cover. But there's a certain tone of voices and everything else, voices in particular, that are picked up very perfectly through this process. The problem is you also lose a lot of the finer energies that were pulled out on CDs and other things. I remember listening to CDs when I got them through excellent sound systems. And that's another thing you're going to have if you have a record player, a turntable, is that you're going to have very high quality equipment if you want that really good sound. And that includes speakers, which of course there is now. We have a lot better speakers and everything else. In the past, you had to spend a lot of money to get this quality stuff. Now it is not as much. So there are certain elements to it. But I remember hearing instruments that I never heard before on CDs because the digital stuff is bringing all those little things up. But the tonal quality in general, over everything, compared to the purity of a record and needle, is inferior to certain extents because you're not picking up the resonance of it, and sound is a resonant frequency. This is why, of course, musicians are using, and what are considered the best sound systems, speakers and amplifiers, are always a valve or tube amplifiers. Tube amplification, tubes in themselves are mighty little machines that are really fascinating. Vacuum tubes, the precursor to the laser, picks up all of these energetic fields that are normally lost when you break it up into this digitalized staircase. So as you keep cutting up all this stuff, while you're picking up some areas, you're also losing other areas, and particularly resident energies. And the resident energies is exactly what you need in the manifesting scalar fields. You need these very dense informational files that cannot be messed with. So when you try and digitalize anything of these types, you are losing a lot of energy. And this is the big problem. Now, and of course, you will not be able to produce quality, quote, scalar and radionics if you're digitalizing anything. So you just ruin the whole effect. Digitalization is not something in this particular area that can be done. And I'm not sure it ever will be. These are unique energy fields. This isn't some sort of picture. This isn't some sort of even CD or DVD where you break things up and there's many factors going into these things where you're acquiring a lot of information. Now, when we get into DVDs in particular and very higher 4K, and of course, there's been Blu-ray for years, you're talking about a very dense field of energy. And these are picked up by photons in your player that then transmit that into your screen. And of course, by using photons and other things, which are lasers, you are then able to pick up huge amounts of information depending on the frequency of the laser. You can't pick up a lot with red or green. It has to be blue. That's why they call it Blu-ray. It's a blue ray or blue laser. And I'm not sure people understand that. You know, so many things are laser based now, which is so important because they're picking up information that normally couldn't because there's so much of it. Computers will eventually get into using internal lasers because it's the only way to pick up large amounts of information and transfer that other places. So, but, you know, a lot can be done with processors and other things, even though I believe we've reached the limit of processing at this particular point, and we're going to have to move on to something else. Quantum computers and so forth all are used. They're very strange to begin with, but they all include large amounts of use of lasers, which are basically photons, which you can pack with information that you can't put through something as physical as a transistor or processor. So you've got to understand this energy, and you have to analyze exactly what it is and not get caught up in the ridiculousness of anything that is digitalized. Digitalization is ruining this kind of information. It ruins a photograph to use for energetic. That's why we use what is called Polaroid technology. The old Polaroid, which has the developer, a chemical that holds the photon energy so that it can stay there and be used almost indefinitely. If you don't use it, and it has to be the process that, there are a lot of instant films coming out now. Liquid crystal, what did I see? Somebody else brought to my attention some sort of silver stuff. This is not working. This doesn't hold the energy. It has to be the old proven technologies of Polaroids, just like the old proven vacuum tubes, which are very superior, and as is a Polaroid for energies. That doesn't mean they're good for everything. I wouldn't suggest people take Polaroid pictures of family events or other things. And you can't transmit these to other people, attach them to emails, etc. This is where the great digital stuff comes in, and they're great for that. And there's nothing wrong with that. So the whole idea is that there is something wrong if you're trying to use the energy there. They're inferior. And when people struggle and they're not getting results, well, they're not getting results because they're not using the proper technology. So if you're printing out a picture, and of course sometimes you have to use these with Scalar radionic machines, you have an inferior energy there, and this is going to hurt your manifesting. Now, most of these tools, and when we talk about scalar radionics, we're talking about using it on yourself or someone you know. Generally, you're not printing this out of someone you don't know. And of course, this is the limitations of Polaroids. But there are fancy Polaroids that you can even get amplification on, take better pictures, etc. But you still have to be within a very close range in general. So this makes it limited. But we're not looking for clarity. So you hold this in front of your face, you click the button, and whatever it looks like, it looks like. There's no reason to have something clear. Clear doesn't mean energetic. And the pictures themselves are relatively expensive. Per shot, 50 cents, $1 each. Well, that can add up. And we all want to watch every money that we don't have to. So you don't want to it's not clear enough, I'm going to take another one. Well, that's the nature of these things. It's just as simple as that. You're not looking for clarity. You're looking for energy. So it's apples and oranges here. You want a good picture? Most likely your cell phone is taking great pictures. So these are the things that you have to look at and understand. That's what you use it for. You use that for taking pictures, to send to relatives, to use for other things, to put in print out great pictures from a good printer that you put in a photo album. You don't use basically Polaroids, and Polaroids are notorious for fading over the years. I had some of these from many, many years ago, and they're all washed out now because the color images there don't hold up well. But I have tested these, and it still has most of at least 80% of the intrinsic energy field still in them. Now, Polaroid cameras, can be gotten today. There are many types. None is better than the others. I recommend everybody go to eBay and get the cheapest Polaroid camera they can get. Fuji, Sharper Image is my favorite. And usually you can get a Sharper Image brand new camera for anywhere from $15 to $25. You can't beat that. The film you can also get on eBay at a good price, and it's available all around the world. And of course, Fuji has been making these cameras for many, many years. And surprisingly, these cameras are extremely popular, apparently with younger people in general who want instant stuff at parties and other things. So all of this is surprisingly popular and easily available out there. And you can get a camera very inexpensively. Get a used one. These cameras are pretty rugged, and most likely these cameras have not been used all that much because they're kind of fun playthings. So you certainly can get a camera for $20 or under that is used. And just, of course, like everything on eBay, watch your shipping and everything else. I always like to get new stuff. I've seen if you get a camera like Sharper Image and it's off color like pink, you can get a brand new one for $20. Well, do you care? I don't. So if you want to get something fancier, you can. There's a few other models that used to come out from years ago that you can get fancier ones that have lenses. Some had glass lenses. I mean, you can spend as much as you want. We used to sell these in the past, and generally people didn't want to spend the money to get something ready to go, and became a problem even inventory these and shipping them. So now what we have, and of course everybody needs to get the empowerment disc. Now this brings the energy up in your camera by transmuting the electrical process to gather even more energy. So once you charge your camera up with this disc and you leave it on the camera on the disc, you have now converted this to a high energy tool. And it's a one-time expense that you get a disc like this and you're off to the races. Then get the cheapest film you can and get the cheapest camera you can, which are readily available. As I said, you can get them on eBay. And there isn't any good Polaroid camera. Just find one that has instant film. And of course, remember, there's lots of variants now. Fuji has large film cameras that have big pictures. Your average camera now is using a credit card size Polaroid film. That's all you need. You don't need a big one. They even have super large ones. They have all sorts of features now because, believe it or not, as I said, all this stuff is very popular. Find a regular camera that uses the regular film and you're set, and you just hold it in front of your face. Some of these cameras even have selfie mirrors on them, but it isn't, if they don't, who cares? You're holding it in front of your face at arm's length, basically, and you snap the picture, you're done. And of course, you want to do this for everybody in your family, your pets, etc. And to a certain extent, if you really have people that need, that you have to work on, relatives, etc., well, they could do their own selfies like this, and depending on your financial abilities, but I mean, you're talking about a camera that you can get for $25 or $30 and film that they can take at another $10 for a small amount of shots. And so you can get really good stuff if they're relatives that you want to, or special people that you want to protect and have that. And then you just keep these pictures, and they're good. You know, it depends on the situation, what the person is going through, but, you know, you generally should change the pictures at least every 6 months, if not 90 days, if you can, if it's a serious situation. But 6 months is usually a good amount of time to then change everything over to a new one. Past that, the energies in a person usually have changed, and you're going to become less effective trying to work on them at a distance to do that. So do keep that in mind, but it's very important we're talking about this energy. Again, you can pick up analog energy in a Polaroid picture, which is full of information, which you can't do with a digital because it's going to take that and break it up into this stairways of little cuts constantly through the entire wave, so that wave of energy can be controlled to manipulate it. But we're not trying to manipulate it in that fashion. What we want is the entire informational energetic wave that you get from analog to do this kind of work. So, like everything in life, there's like the use of tubes and so many other things, there's certainly great technology that cannot be overcome. Now, a lot of the tube technology you don't even know about, and it's in a lot of different, they have miniature tubes because they made actually miniature tube components that are in a lot of your music type things. So the Japanese developed this many, many years ago. So internal circuits have this tube amplification, and you're not even familiar with it. But for what we need powerful tube amplifiers to use in the production of these energies. Very, very important, because in the end, if you don't strongly, high level amplify and transmit these energies, you're falling back into what is a very bad psychic empowered state of where it's basically everything is based on your intentions and psychic power. And the bottom line with all that stuff, your biophysical powers, as because psychic is a terrible word, but the bottom line is that you're just falling back on that. And the unfortunate thing about that is that it's weak, very, very weak. Psychic energies are very weak, and they burn out, and they're undependable. when you amplify through a particular process of using tube amplifications and transmitting, and we're talking about using high level and powerful things as well, this is where you overcome the personal feebleness of our biophysical energies and our state of mind and everything else that goes with it. You are able to then get over all that and have a consistent scientific tool putting out consistent energies. And until we do that, you can really not judge any kind of success. And of course, when we get into old style radionic units, which most of them have given up using any kind of electrical power because it doesn't make any sense and they were never amplified correctly. And when you use solid state amplification, non-tube based, you're amplifying what is a very small amount, maybe 10 or 15% of the electromagnetic energies out there. And all the other energies, the scalar energies, are not being amplified. So this reduces all this kind of success and energy down to a very, very low level. So amplification is critical. This is what we're moving into and have been for many years. People that do that get great success. People that are trying to jump ahead and use what is fake amplification, these ridiculous basically analyzing tools that are working off of the electromagnetic frequencies and saying they can tell you what diseases you have, etc. This is complete and totally bogus. It's a con game that produces a bunch of garbage information that appears to be impressive but can never be repeated. The bottom line, if you have an analyzer that's going to tell you what's wrong with you, you should be able to analyze yourself, get a reading, wait 5 minutes, analyze yourself again, and get the exact same reading because nothing would have changed in that short period of time. You could theoretically do it within a couple of minutes. So there's really no change whatsoever, or even immediately. But when you do that with this fake, bogus technology that is pushed by ignorant, buffoonish liars, what you get down to is you find it doesn't work. It's all a con. And this is what happens when people are not really doing things that have credibility. They're doing stuff to produce comic book Hollywood effects, trying to say their technology is so great because we can figure out exactly what's happening to them. No, their technology, that just proves their technology is garbage and not worth anything. And that they don't have any credibility because they're using stuff that they're not testing, they're not doing anything. It's complete and total bogus lies. And we're not going to get anywhere doing that. And people that put out stuff like this have no idea what they're doing except, well, I guess they do. They're filling their pockets with what appears to be impressive technology, which is nothing but babbling idiot data that has no value to anybody other than a fantasy to say, oh, we're picking up that vibration in you before it happened. Well, this kind of speculative nonsense, but let's go with that. Well, let's find out exactly what people have and test it. But they're going to weasel out of this, and the bottom line is that it's worthless, and people that say that and think that you can get some sort of a digital analyzing because you picked up a particular meridian that is connected to your heart, and you put a little frequency going there, and the heart reacts in a particular way, and that then says that you're sensitive to that. This is bogus technology that doesn't work well. And if it is working well, let's prove it. Let's prove the fact of what is there and how it works. So then none of them have this. None of them have put a dime into research, have put a dime into what they're doing. It's all stuff to take thousands out of your pocket. So understand the difference between scalar, or what is considered analog. Well, analog is still a frequency. It's not really scalar. But analog, which is a type of smooth or unbroken, continuous frequency, and what is a digital, which is a frequency that's broken up into all these little steps, and as such has some uses, but has broken the original flow of that signal. Hope that's clear. Until next time.